Hello, I'm Edward Gomez. I work for Las Cumbres Observatory. Now, why are many of us here? It's normally because we've had, in our childhood or in our past, some inspirational experience which pushed us to be astronomers and want to maybe educate others about astronomy or science. And a lot of the time, when you ask people about that, it'll be something like this, an experience where they've had a telescope, looked through the eyepiece, and been inspired by what they've seen. Well, that's not the case for me, and I suspect that's not the case for a lot of your target audience. I live in Old South Wales, not New South Wales, and this is what the weather is normally like. It's normally either overcast or it's raining. And so we don't get a lot of opportunities to go out and view the night sky. There's also uh, a lot of light pollution in the UK. Actually, in Wales, we're very lucky, but then we have the problem of clouds. Now, if you do get one of these rare opportunities where you can go and look at the night sky and have somebody who is willing to set up a telescope for you, then you'd be forgiven for thinking that you'd look through the eyepiece and see something like this. Um, but actually, what I found when I was a kid is I'd look through the eyepiece and see something like this, which I don't consider particularly inspirational. Not considering then that you've spent several hours waiting in the cold, you've had somebody with you who maybe isn't very experienced at setting up telescopes, and all of that added to not a particularly inspirational experience. There are some exceptions to this, and I think that seeing the moon through binoculars actually is way better than a telescope. Seeing Saturn, Jupiter, and comets through a telescope is an inspirational experience, but seeing something like this really is not. On top of that, if you want to run an educational project, John Percy put it very succinctly: the stars come out at night, the students don't. It may have been the case that in the past it was very easy to have a minibus full of students from a school and take them to a dark sky at night. But now it's really just not possible, not only because of the pandemic, but also because of permissions and the light pollution. So really, robotic telescopes offer us the ability to do a much better job of inspiring young people with structured educational projects. And I think that actually they stand a much better chance of reaching those audiences. So if you want to go for a project with robotic telescopes, there are many, many options for you. You don't have to set up your own robotic telescope. There are many that exist already that you could make use of. My own organization, Las Cumbres Observatory, offers projects, but there are a whole host of others throughout the world. You just need to Google or search on the internet for robotic telescopes. When you're setting up an educational project using robotic telescopes, and actually using any educational project, I have 4 recommendations for you, and these are as follows. Goals first. You really need to lay out what you want to achieve and what your audience needs to achieve in order for your project to be successful. Don't get excited about the technology first and think about you want to use this technology and then you fit the goals in around that. Really think what you want to achieve educationally, and that will really enforce a good practices right from the start. You really need to have a very good robotic telescope setup already in order for you to have the luxury of having a goals first approach, which is why I wouldn't recommend setting up your own robotic telescope. It is fairly straightforward to do that these days. You can buy off the shelf software if you have a telescope and put it in your back garden or your school's back garden or on your new university roof. But I really wouldn't recommend doing that. Something I also would not recommend is replicating the eyepiece experience. This is a mistake many, many robotic telescope projects have made over the years. Robotic telescope's operation is so fundamentally different to conventional telescopes with an eyepiece, and that's why setting up your goals first is such an important thing to do. Um, but you need to know who your audience is to start with, and that's my second point. Really think about who your primary audience is. Don't just say we have a robotic telescope, we could do anything, because if you say that you could do anything, you will most likely do nothing, or you will have a confused, mismatched project that will not have the right focus, not really make the best of the tools that you have available. So goals first, and then think about who your primary audience is. It doesn't mean that you can't have other audiences, but you should really set up your goals according to who you want to inspire and educate first. And please bear in mind that what inspired you when you were younger and when you were getting into this business is not what will inspire this generation of students and young people. I was not blown away by standing in a field for several hours waiting to look at a fuzzy blob through an eyepiece. Not everybody cares about the technical details of the telescopes, but they will care if you have the correct scaffolding around your project to lead them up to either an amazing astronomical image that's really high quality, or doing some really phenomenal data analysis so that they feel like that they've achieved something as part of your program. And that's something which you can do with robotic telescopes. You don't have to spend several weeks or nights going to a remote site. You can. It's as easy as staying in your home or in your virtual classroom and asking the robotic telescope to take a time series. That should be the focus. Then doing the data analysis. That's really where the achievement comes. My third point is evaluate. This is a point which is almost always neglected in educational projects. It's so important for not only for you, but for your audience to have evaluation built into your project. Uh, and I can't stress enough how important it is to make the evaluation part of the activity, the educational activity that you're going to do with your audience. Because if it's part of the activity, then it's not added on to the end. It's something which they will do naturally as part of it. So you don't have to worry about, well, there wasn't enough time for the evaluation. It's part of it. So if you have quizzes partway through that will assess how much they've understood, if you've got if you have something as simple as 2 stars and a wish, so that at each different at various appropriate places in your program, you can ask your students, okay, what were your 2 favorite things and what do you wish had been better? It can be as simple as that, but really you need to then take those comments and feed that back into your program. I'm not talking about educational research, which obviously has to have much more complex evaluation. I'm talking about something which will help you improve your program so that it better suits and better aligns with the expectations of your audience. And my fourth recommendation is that time is precious. It's precious for, particularly now in this pandemic era. It's particularly precious for your mentors, whether those are going to be teachers or whether those are going to be amateur astronomers, whoever is going to be assisting you in your project. Their time is precious, so don't waste their time by making them read through very, very long documents. Really do give them a very small background and then get them started on your program. Remove anything that isn't necessary, and then you've actually got a much higher likelihood of them wanting to continue through the process of your program, whether it's a short activity or if it's one that lasts for several weeks because maybe you're following some phenomenon that's evolving over time. I hope that's given you some food for thought. If you want some more ideas, please look at my review paper on robotic telescopes in education. The reference is there. It was published in the Astronomical Review. If you're interested in creating your own educational project using robotic telescopes, I'd love to hear from you. Las Cumbres Observatory operates an educational partnership called Global Sky Partners, where groups that have educational projects come to us and we help them to add a robotic telescope dimension to it. Please have a look at that URL for other examples of projects that you could do with robotic telescopes. Thank you.